A person of interest has formally been charged in the killings of two people at an Elkhorn sports bar. 33-year-old Emerson Weingart and 37-year-old Gina Weingart were killed back on February 1st. We're learning Thomas Rout faces 5 charges, including 2 charges of first-degree intentional homicide, 1 charge of attempted first-degree homicide. A criminal complaint also states on the night of the killing, Rout had fired his gun at a 3rd victim as she ran out of the bar to safety. Rout has served a number of years in federal prison for other convictions, including arson, burglary, and forgery.
A woman who fell from a moving UTV Wednesday suffered life-threatening injuries. It happened along County Highway V in Cazenovia. Officials learned the woman had been the passenger and the 25-year-old driver, according to police, showed signs they'd been drinking. The driver was arrested and the 35-year-old woman was med-flighted to UW Hospital.